I have met you, right? We met last time I was here. You sit right next
Is
to me.
that right? Right now?
Yeah, we're actually getting this ready for this role.
I know, I heard on the, MTR this morning. It sounded
I had the chief next to me, so.
Yeah, that's true.
All right, I think it's time to call the meeting to order. We'll start with a review of the agenda. If anybody wants to make any changes, you can. Make a motion to do so.
So move.
Sure. Move to approve?
That was it, so move.
Okay. Any discussion?
Was there a second? I'll second it.
Perfect. Now let's vote.
That requires us.
All those in favor of approving the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right. Let's do new commissioner introductions. Matt, if you want to start.
You bet. Nice to meet everyone. My name is Matt Seal. I had an interest in this board, and so I applied towards it. I had sat in on a few meetings over the last several months, so I got to observe you from the back side of your heads mostly. But I'm happy to be here. I'm humbled to be here, and I'm thankful to be a part of this. So a little bit of background on me. I came from this area. I grew up here. Was born in Eugene, Springfield area. Went through the school district here. Went to the University of Oregon. Was actually employed as a Lincoln County deputy sheriff for a while, and have always had an interest in this kind of line of work and how it serves the community. My father was a veteran of this police department as well. Had a career here. So as I moved into my professional career, I just decided that I wanted to serve the community more on this capacity. So here I am. Thank you.
Thank you so much. V?
Hi, my name is V. Huynh. I moved to Eugene about 2.5, almost 3 years ago from San Francisco, where I lived for about 30 years. A little bit about me. I worked for about 20 years. I worked with the public, with children, youth, and families. And I don't have any family members that serve in the police, but the last thing that I did before I left San Francisco was I served on the advisory board for the San Francisco Police Department. Ended up co-chairing the board. I've also worked on campus safety. I worked as a student, helped with backup dispatch, as well as staffing the front desk, reorganizing the evidence room, and then I also did some gang prevention outreach when I was, that was back in the early 90s. But other than that, I've worked in teaching. I've taught kids in high school, and I've also worked with the blind and visually impaired community, created programs to help enrich their social skills, to educational support, as well as career and job training. So that's a little bit about me. And the reason why I want to be a part of this is because I think it's important to have a diverse, group of commissioners. So I bring to the table as an Asian American, and along with other aspects. So I hope to be able to contribute to this group. Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Now moving on to public comments. We have one from Janet. If you'd like to come up to the table, you can give your public comment.
I sat at the table, stand at the table.
You're more than welcome to take a seat.
Oh, well, I'm here as a citizen. I am trained as a CERT, Community Emergency Responder Training. I don't know how active they are yet. I'm an educator by vocation, also from California, about 4th, 5th grade there. I read about this meeting just this morning, and I had a number of questions. I cited on my form the criminal behavior, how that's being addressed, The response time by St. Vinnie de Paul, as I understand, the city has contracted with St. Vinnie de Paul to do the move-out cleanup of the, what some people call homeless, I call it illegal camping, people that are trashing our once beautiful city. I live in the Whitaker neighborhood, and I think I'm on the front line of the problem. I am a frequent caller to the non-emergency line, reporting the instances of the criminal behaviors that are occurring in my neighborhood. So I'm keenly interested. I'm all for people being diverse, but I'd like to see, rather than arguments being presented, that we can all come with a common agreement that this is a growing problem and it's getting worse day by day, and I fear it will get worse before it begins to get any better. So my question I'd like to pose to the panel, or if someone could provide me with the information, is with regard to the contract with St. Vinnie de Paul and the timeline, whether or not the city could deploy other agencies that could have a quicker response time and getting it the minute those blue tarps hit the sidewalk, they're out of there. There should be an ample property somewhere in each section of this city, not just Whitaker, South Eugene, North Eugene, East Eugene, West Eugene. So each section of the city, urban areas, have a buy-in to having a place where these folks can set up their tents, whatever it is that they want to be, because some of them have become disenfranchised with being sociable. Some of them, I understand, have mental health problems. I contend that the vast majority want to use their drugs and get free food, and the freebies that Eugene is so liberal in delivering. So I'd like to see and hear a conversation about stronger deterrents that are keeping these people from coming into our city and destroying what so many people have earned. And I am now paying a payroll tax on top of my other taxes, and I like to get some direct answers through the Register Guard with a spokesperson, making it more publicly known to the public. Also, I'm very interested in doing a very clear understanding of what the city pays St. Vinnie de Paul, what their process is involved in getting the folks, and what deterrents, if any, all these panels that we have are pursuing and implementing and keeping the problem from growing larger. I surrender my 3 minutes, or whatever.
Well, thank you for coming to give comments and coming to the meeting.
Thank you. And if I could ask real quick, is there an additional piece? Because I've got other errands. Or is there any more? Will there be any additional conversation with regard to this after this public?
Yeah, so St. Vincent de Paul's time slot is at 6:40.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And then move on to commissioner comments. Stacy, if you want to say anything, I know you've got a chief's report later.
Yeah, I am here on behalf of the chief. He's fishing, as I mentioned earlier. So I was asked kind of in the 11th hour to come, and I know I was here recently introducing myself. 5 o'clock tonight, I think, was the window or the timeline for the initiative to get signatures to put the community safety initiative on the ballot. They've surrendered the fact that they didn't meet that mark, and so you know, we were obviously waiting for that information today. Register Guards already has it out. I think that would be the one piece of information I could share right now that's pretty important to our world and the heavy lift we're about to embark on. So.
The stabbing at Starbucks downtown has been on my mind. I think it's inevitably going to damage the narrative sense of our average citizen. As I think of it, the narrative has been downtown is unpleasant. You know, you might get hassled. So you can easily imagine a couple of people that have spoken to me if that downtown is dangerous, you know, I might die if I go downtown. And of course, they're not doing the math and figuring likelihoods. They're just spooked by an incident like that. I keep hoping to hear that those men actually did know one another and the one owed the other money. Yeah, I'd love to hear that.
You will,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
So I just wanted to mention that as a concern.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to welcome our new members. We had some great candidates. We were really lucky to be able to pick from the cream of the crop. We're and council's really excited to have both of you here. So thanks for serving.
I just learned from V that we were probably working in different parts of gang-related issues in San Francisco at the same time in the early 90s. We know a lot of the same. It's a very small world. Some of you are aware that my partner and I recently inherited a sizable sum of money, and we're trying to put much of that to work in the community good. And one of the first things that I've done in regard to this commission is make good on a promise I made almost a year ago. I'm sorry I didn't get to it sooner, which is to take the commission's brochure. Jeremy gave me the text on that. I turned that into public service announcements on some of the Facebook, essentially news magazines that I run. So just as a trial, I'm gonna try to reach 5,000 people in the next week or so, probably knock off at 10,000 and look at what that cost and how effective that was. But I'm pleased with being able to put essentially the text of the brochure into people's phones and tablets. And interested that, oh, it is Old Home Week. Welcome, Commissioner. I'm pleased to see that there's a lot of positive response to it, to getting this description of what the commission does, and clearly a lot of folks who had no idea. And I'm very grateful to whoever did all the heavy lifting, writing the damn thing in the first place, because it's very well put together. That's it.
Oh. Just as I'm eating a cherry. Well, the thing at the downtown at Starbucks, we've discussed that a long time for ongoing, this kind of concern for downtown. And that's what I hear from people that I talk to. They're a little bit worried about downtown. My daughter worked at that Starbucks, which was a nightmare to begin with, and has been. It's ongoing. And one of the things is that there aren't any public restrooms, which has now been kind of addressed a little bit at some times. But that was one of the things, because Starbucks is seen as the public restroom. And so whether or not they give them a code, or whether or not, they do what they can do, because they won't do a key, so it's always a code, well, they just pass around the code, so that really isn't effective either. So I'm sad to hear what happened, and I hope I think that Starbucks is gonna close. But that's not going to alleviate, there'll be another bathroom issue, and that was the fundamental thing that was the problem with people coming in there who weren't going to be customers. They just wanted to use the restroom. So that's something we need to pay attention to for downtown, but not the police department. But it is one of the issues that's a problem there. And welcome to the new members.
Thank you.
Glad to have you.
Thanks. The only comment I have is when I first moved here, people just warned me, my real estate agent warned me about downtown, about staying away from the Whitaker area. Then I hear it from my neighbors. So there's definitely that reputation for the downtown area. But after living here, and having a chance to go down to some of the restaurants that are down in the Whitaker area, I'm from San Francisco. This is nothing. This is nothing compared to the Tenderloin in San Francisco, for example, or East Oakland. So I got to see the difference, and of course, you can't compare. It's like apples and oranges. You can't compare them. So I do get it. I get the reputation is unfair, and I get the one of the community members who commented earlier about there's a need that something has to be done because it's impacting not just the residents that live there, but also the businesses that are in the area as well. That's all. Thank you.
I think downtown's delightful,
No problem.
personally. Welcome to the new commissioners, and I know that there's an issue with something that happened. What happened with that Starbucks incident was a mental health issue, and nothing to do with homelessness. And I want to change the narrative on that, because I think we need to keep that in mind, that it wasn't something that anybody could have seen coming. It was definitely just a mental health issue, and more money should go to Coots, because they're the ones who are dealing with that situation. So that's what I'll say.
No comment.
I'd just like to say welcome to the new members. Appreciate you guys putting the time and effort into being here and the homework that it takes to be prepared for meetings and stuff. I know it's a commitment to everybody that's on the board and to everyone that has stayed on for moving forward. Sean, for taking on the lead role, which has a whole other angle to it. And that, sorry that I've missed a couple of meetings. Glad that I was able to make it tonight, and looking forward to diving back more into policy-related work come September. So, working on our search and seizure policy review, legal reviews as we speak, to make sure we're all dialed in to have some good conversation in the fall.
My only comment is thank you for ensuring I have quorum for the first meeting. This is still a chance for public comment if I know you guys came in late. James, if you want to take a seat at the table.
Thank you. For the record, my name is James Ivory Manning Jr. I'm the senator for this district, and I began right here at this police commission 6 years ago. Or better, when we were doing a transition from this location from downtown at the time. During a period of time where we were closing down the Whittier Street substation, and I recall that Chief Kearns at the time saying that we were spending something like $80,000 a year to rent that one place that didn't have a lot of high traffic or high volume. But that's not why I'm here. I'm here to say that I really thank you for being a part of this very vital commission. I learned a lot when I was here, and what I learned from this I use now at the state legislature to make sure that we're doing the same thing. And I have to tell you, EPD, this commission is leading the way, continue to lead the way in the state of Oregon. We were the first to come out with body cams. Portland continues to push back on it. You're doing innovative work, and you have a positive impact on the community. I will be mindful not to, make a comment about the Whitaker. The Whitaker is awesome. I enjoy the WIT, as I do all the others, and I try to get around to all of the neighborhood associations and stuff. And I got to tell you, there is no other place that I would rather live than the city of Eugene. The people here, the police department, and by the way, I am a member of the Eugene Police Foundation. So I continue to make sure that I got to reach. I have my pen on, as you can see there. Yeah, okay. And I wear it in the Capitol too, especially when we do recognition of law enforcement. And I work very diligently on issues that's related to law enforcement, because our officers that are out there are a community investment in terms of the professionalism that they bring. And not only that, I want to make sure that not only do their physical appearance are taken care of, but also their mental, what they deal with every night. As a former police officer, I didn't get called to a lot of parties. When I got a call, something terribly happened. And I was there to either clean up something or wrestle with someone or apprehend someone. So I understand. I am good friends with OSP Superintendent Travis, and I talk quite a bit. Tim, OSP, I got a lot of connections with them, but I want to come back and reaffirm my connection with EPD. You're doing an awesome job. Please let all the officers out there know that they are appreciated and they are respected. And this commission, again, I do appreciate you, I respect you. I won't be here for the whole meeting because I got a whole bunch of others, but I wanted to make sure I took this opportunity to come in, Elwood, you and I, we go way back, don't we? Okay, well, that's all I have to say, and unless you have any questions for me. Thank you so much.
Just thank you
Thank you
for your service.
Yes.
All right. Now is the time to review and approve the notes from last time. Take a look at the notes here.
I move to approve the minutes from the prior meeting.
Second.
Any discussion? All right, all the ayes, everybody in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? So we get approved. All right, now for one of the main courses, the auditor report. Yeah, I think we got plenty of room if you guys want to. Trying to say I'm sorry.
Who would like the clicker? She's the clicker. We're a little surprised.
Man, the remote.
I have the whole report in there. My name's Mark Gissiner. I'm the police auditor for Eugene. I've been here since 2009. On my right is Leah Pitcher, who's our deputy auditor. She's been here since 2010. And Beatrice Hernandez is our community engagement specialist. Oh, coordinator and translation specialist. The longest title in the city that I never get right. And she's been with us about 3 years. So we added that position in 3 years. You have in your packet our entire report, which sort of surprises me. It is voluminous, but one of the things I think that stands out for us as an oversight agency is that we talk about every case so that people know about every case. And if you feel like reading it, I know some people enjoy that and some people don't, but it's in every case. I forgot to recognize Mr. Senator. Good to see you, sir. Thanks for coming. And Counselor Ye, one of my bosses, so I have to make sure I recognize that. And so that's what is nice in a sense with Eugene is that we're big enough to have big city problems, but we're small enough that sometimes we can be almost an incubator in terms of seeing how things work and those things. I know from San Francisco, I know many of your former directors of the Office of Citizens Complaints, if that's what they still call it. So I know they do a lot of vigorous work, and a lot of what we do is very similar to those. We're modeled the same in a lot of ways, other than they have their own investigative teams and they don't have an internal affairs. I've been involved in police oversight on and off, well, directly for about 27 years and on and off for about 40 years. Coming from Cincinnati, I don't think any of us are from California, so we're now in the minority on this table. But I cut my teeth in civilian oversight in Cincinnati and then internationally for a while, and with the Justice Department, did some work for them. So we've had a lot of experience. I wanted to also, I know that not long ago, I know the new members weren't here, the Internal Affairs presented to you guys and did an outstanding work on it. I remember when I first came here, it used to be just a few pages, and we got pretty vigorous on our annual report, and they as well. So they really did an outstanding job on their report. I forgot to mention at my performance review yesterday, I'm exhausted. Never in my 10 years has there been any meddling by council or the mayor or the police chief or anyone in the business that we do. And I'm really appreciative of that, because over the course of my career, there's been a lot of meddling in the kind of work that we do. And so I really do appreciate that I get to do my job the way I think it ought to be done. And if council approves of that, they keep me on board. So I want to make sure that the community understands that we have been completely and totally independent the last 10 years. Now, I have had good relationships with the chiefs and with the new chiefs. I'm excited to have a new chief. I'm not a yeller and screamer kind of person. I think we make change through progress and working together and doing things professionally. And I know over the past 10 years, the culture of the department has changed significantly. I'm impressed, very impressed with the current leadership of this department, and look forward to working with them. Things that probably worry me the most, I suppose, both from an officer safety standpoint and a response to the community, is there's going to be a lot of young officers. And you can go through training and you can watch film and all that stuff, but until your adrenaline goes to the highest level it can go to when you're a police officer in the middle of something, as anyone who's done it, such as Senator Manning, it's a whole different thing. So we're excited to have new blood in there, but at the same time, I expect we'll have more problems. We have to articulate here and present the report is, so we've had an increase in complaints. Again, a lot of that has to do with things like response times or how they manage situations when they respond. But I'll turn it over to Leah now. Again, it's an honor and a privilege to be here and have an opportunity to present. And I wish you all the best for the commissioners and the work that you do. You do very important work for our community. I want to thank you for that.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Again, it's good to see you. Welcome to the new members. I gave a presentation a few months, 6 months ago-ish, about our office, and I'm happy to do that again if it comes up into a thing of interest. But if you have any questions, give us a call. I'm Leah. I'm the deputy auditor. Like I said, Mark said, I've been here for 9 years. So we've got our annual report tonight. We can go over some figures from that, some key figures from that. You obviously have all of it in there. But Mark also wanted us to focus on some things we talked with council about for our community outreach efforts, which is Beatrice's wheelhouse. So I can do the quick back to the figures really quick, and then if you have questions, jump in anytime. I'm going to stand up because I don't know if this clicker's going to see me. Jeremy?
Is it not going?
It's not. Your clicker doesn't work.
Just, okay, well, do you want this?
I'll just go over here.
If you just use the arrow keys,
Okay,
and
I can do that.
that'll function for you.
Okay.
as well.
Both sides of the
Hi. Oh, thank you. So that was a slide about our community outreach, but like I said, we'll come back to that. We're going in a different order than I thought. So these were our complaints last year. We had a 20% increase, which was not insubstantial. I think I spoke to it when I was here in January that we had quite a large increase. Proportionally, they're all about the same. We have proportionally about the same number of service complaints, inquiries, policy complaints, which are service complaints are minor misconduct per city code. So that's, people not getting a good response time or what they feel is a professional response once the person arrives for whatever reason. Inquiries are usually they come in and either they just have a question or we classify it as an inquiry so we can try and figure out a little more about what's going on. Incident reviews are sort of in that similar vein. Allegations of misconduct, we had 5% allegations of misconduct last year. Those are the serious misconduct complaints. So that includes both, all of this is internally and externally generated complaints. I noted there that 355 of the 392 complaints we got last year were from the community, not internal complaints. So inquiries, service complaints both increased a lot. Our annual average since I started, which is an arbitrary date, but I figured I'm doing the stats, so I might as well be the start. Our annual average is 370, and obviously that was a higher number. Sorry, I pushed the wrong button. So that was last year, and then you'll see we did as of June 20th, I think, I calculated what we were projected to get for this year, and it's over 450 if we keep going. We've had a lot the first half of this year. So we'll see. We'll see. You get to see next year's numbers. Woo. But it has been a lot. And I would say anecdotally, there's been a lot of response time issues. So we're hoping to see those go down with adequate staffing.
And about 50% of those, I think there is that mention of the payroll tax. Now,
Now we get to.
and so we get that part of in the equation of the complaint now. Is people are aware of that and their
Exclusively,
expectations.
or as a part of
As
what
part
they
of the complaint.
and they're charging
Yeah,
us
and
back.
you're gonna add this payroll tax, and I'm not getting the service that I expect now, so we're all hopeful on, with the additional revenue and resources that things will get better in terms of our complaint process.
This one's a little messy, I apologize. As you all know, you changed the code of conduct last year. So this sort of compiles the two codes of conduct. So basically the bigger picture is in the 21 allegations of misconduct, sometimes those allege several different violations of policy. Often those are violations of the code of conduct policy. So I tried to combine things that just changed titles, but anyway, it's messy, I apologize. But in those 21 allegations of misconduct and 3 allegations of criminal conduct, there were 48 specific allegations in all of those against 23 different employees. And then 56% of those specific allegations were sustained. So of those specific allegations that were sustained, those resulted in discipline. Now, this does not mean that, 12 employees got an oral reprimand. It means 12 specific allegations resulted in an oral reprimand, so that might be 1 employee, it might be 3. I actually can't remember off the top of my head, but I could figure it out for you if you asked later. So those are the types of discipline that do occur. Our office is not involved in discipline of officers at all. That's per our ordinance and the collective bargaining agreement. We take part in investigations and adjudications. Well, we make a recommendation on adjudication and the chief adjudicates, and then the disciplinary process is completely removed from us. But we get to report on trends.
I don't know if you know, but
Yeah.
are the ones who resign prior to, do they resign because of the allegations?
I'm not privy to their thought process, but the timing would be suspect.
Yeah, that's what I figured, yeah, maybe.
Okay.
Thank you.
And there was one who resigned during the investigation, so that one's not on here because they resigned prior to the allegation being adjudicated. This is just for ones who stayed through the sustaining of their allegations. Does that make sense?
And those still get reported to DPSST, the Department of Public Safety.
For standards and training.
Standards and training.
For sworn
which
employees.
determines whether or not they can keep their certification as a law enforcement officer in Oregon.
And I should mention, this includes both sworn and non-sworn employees, so the DPSST issues would come up for sworn employees.
So is the investigation dropped altogether?
I'm sorry, we can't take questions.
I'll ask her later. That's okay.
So service complaints are our most common type of complaint. You've got the numbers in front of you. So 60% of those are what we call performance. So that's basically they didn't perform to a standard that either the person complaining or maybe our office thought was what's expected. Service level is more of that often that timing issue of you didn't get the service level that you would expect as a member of this community. Courtesy is also our other sort of up there one, and that's they were rude to me. Sometimes it's specific, sometimes it's not specific, sometimes it's name calling alleged that doesn't wash out once you watch the video. It's a combination of things. Sometimes it's name calling that you see in the video. Like it goes both ways. But like I said, predominantly these are performance issues. These are handled by the employee supervisor. They then write a memo that comes to our office before the complaint's closed, so we can review and make sure that it was handled to a standard that we would expect, and usually they are. Most, I mean, like 99% of the time they are. I don't want to create an issue where there is none. Okay, so those are your stats. I'll go back to the other end of the table if you have questions.
And I wanted to mention one of the things, and we haven't really, I suppose it depends on the allegation. I am responsible for classifying all of the cases. So I determine, or Leah determines, whether it should be an allegation of misconduct or a service complaint or a policy complaint or a performance complaint. And sometimes we talk about those in our weekly IA meetings when the chief's present and the deputy chief are present. So that is solely my responsibility. In addition to all these, there's a, which I'm sure has been explained to you, there's a process within the state now to report if a person feels that there's bias-based policing or that they've been discriminated against. So there's a process in place, and EPD, actually one of the first agencies again in the state, a leader in it, immediately sends a supervisor. I mean, if a person just whispers, I think that you stop me because of this, or because of the color of my skin. A supervisor comes, does an immediate investigation of it, enters it into our system, enters it into the system that goes to the state reporting office, and in every instance, then I review those. I look at the body cameras and things like that, and the body cams have been a great blessing. They take time. I watch a lot of film now. We watch a lot of film, and we didn't used to watch a lot of film, so it's, we're triaging them now a lot sooner in that instance. And over the past 2 years, we've had 35 in which a person has expressed that they felt that their contact with the police was bias-based. We know that more people feel that way, but to articulate that in the presence of someone who has very powerful powers like a police officer is probably difficult for many people, and understandably so. And probably at least half of those were radio broadcasts where they went out. So what we're working on is a report in which we are breaking down whether there was at some point discretion by an officer, because it's very difficult to get into their minds and think whether or not that they did it because of the color of their skin. And one that really comes to mind right away was an officer who was driving down a very dark street, and this man just flashed right in front of the patrol car, and the officer almost hit him and then stopped him for a pedestrian violation. He happened to be African American, and he gave him a ticket, but that was one of those discretionary kind of things. But quite honestly, if someone runs right in front of my patrol car, you're probably going to get a ticket. But we looked at those from a discretionary standpoint because, again, it's been it's very difficult to prove. California sustained, the entire state of California sustained 10 for 2017 of bias policing, and Los Angeles 2. And I think Los Angeles had 3 million contacts, I think, with people, something along those lines. So again, and New York City sustained 0 of all the complaints on bias. So it's very difficult to prove, but nevertheless, we deconstruct it to try to see if there's any patterns with officers. We deconstruct it to try to determine what's discretionary and what's not discretionary. If you go on a radio run on domestic violence and one of the people involved is a person of color, that's not a discretionary decision that you went there. And so we're working on that. We're going to probably do it in concert with EPD's they've done the 1-year study on stops and things like that, and they're compiling that data right now. So we will have that conversation. I think that at the state level, it's still evolving. I know Portland's been reporting it for years, and people have different philosophies. I still remember Syracuse hired 2 different universities. This was several years ago. to study the issue concurrently. And they came up with two completely different findings. Two different universities were, which was gutsy for Syracuse to do that, but they really wanted two different sets of eyes to look at bias-based policing, two completely different set of conclusions. So it's a very difficult thing, but we're going to continue to work on that. So I'll segue now to Beatrice, and I forgot to mention Vicki Cox is back there of our office. And she's the transmission of our office and keeps things rolling, so.
First, let's get to a few questions.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Edward's hand first.
Do we have a breakdown on complaints for sworn and non-sworn personnel?
We don't, we could.
That would be a good thing.
It gets noted in the appendix, but that's not super usable.
I'm just thinking in terms of, you're a lot more likely to get a complaint out of a situation where the person is interacting with the officer right in front of them.
Right.
Than this got mishandled in the paperwork, or I didn't like the way the call taker spoke to me. So it seems like that would be useful
Yeah.
to look at it that way.
Yeah, we could do that, and I think it would be an interesting breakdown for allegations versus service complaints too, because frankly, a fair number of our allegations are with non-sworn employees.
I think I looked at it actually, it's about, of the 21 allegations, it was about 25%, so about 4 or 5. I remember, I have a list back in my office of each person that we had an allegation against, so, because we didn't want to.
I will know, I mean, I said this when I was here before, but just a reminder that CRB can review any closed complaint against a sworn employee, so CRB does not review complaints against non-sworn employees.
Got it.
So, okay.
And then just a comment on this, I've worked closely with cycles of citizen complaints and perceptions with both the San Francisco and Oakland PDs, mostly in the late 90s and early 2000s. And one of the things that was really evident was in Oakland, for instance, you could be literally told after waiting 15 minutes on hold calling 911, is anyone bleeding? And if the answer was no, you could be hung up on because they actually had to get on to the next violent crime. So the knowledge amongst everyone from homeowners to street people was, don't bother calling 911 unless someone's actually dying. So that became a point where people literally had no faith in the system, not in the officers necessarily, that was a separate problem in Oakland, for instance, but in just that this is going to be any help to me at all to bother to pick up the phone. So complaints, in one sense, actually show an engagement with the department, because complaints dropped in Oakland during that time, partly because fewer people are having interactions with the non-sworn people. But just, if you don't have anything to do with the police one way or the other, positive or negative, you don't file complaints about them. You're not involving them in your life. So in a strange way, I might say that a higher number of complaints does indicate a considerable more interest in what the department is or isn't doing amongst the population, no matter how uncomfortable the level of complaints might be. The other thing is, every time that there was something in the public discourse, whether it was in the media or some high-profile case or whatnot, there would be a rise in complaints or commentary that had to be acted on. And as you say, people are calling up saying, hey, I'm paying this public safety tax, why aren't the cops out here faster? Oh, well, the call taker didn't take time to explain to me that it actually is a lag between the tax money coming in and a faster response time. So it's a double-edged sword, the level of interest in a department. If people are disengaged, you might actually have fewer complaints, but the department is less effective. If there are more complaints, but they are not dealt with appropriately or timely fashion, then people don't want to pay more tax money into it. So it's a great big slinky, as I'm sure you folks are aware of. And a lot of it has to do with the PR aspect of it and how people perceive the department.
I would, I firmly believe, and I've looked at enough data, that we are highest per capita in the nation for complaints. And I don't think that that's a reflection of the department. I think it's a reflection of the engagement. A few years back, Philadelphia had 73. Mm-hmm. A population of 4 to 6 million people, something like that.
With a very different
So there was
department.
I'm sure no confidence in the system. Even Boise, it was either 139, 179, something like that. So there's no doubt we are the highest per capita, and again, I think it's that whole engagement piece.
People
of
don't
the
bother
EG
complaining if they
community.
think nobody's gonna listen.
Yeah, because we have a very professional police department. We have folks who don't do things the right way at times. But all things considered, yeah, we have a pretty high volume and I think, again, that's good. That's being engaged in our government.
Yes, and some of it is not knowing how bad some other departments are because they've never been to those cities, but I'll leave that alone.
The next person I have on the queue is actually myself. My question was in regards to, with the new influx of new officers and the unprecedented level of current complaints, and the community safety tax that just passed, do we have enough resources, or do you guys need more?
Well, we're good right now. I consider myself a good steward of taxpayer dollars. I return funds to the general fund every year. We're pressed at times, like spring and summer, and getting all these reports done and all that presses us. And then in the summertime, when there's a surge of officers downtown and far more people downtown, we get it. But we're okay right now. You know, I'd like 73 complaints like Philadelphia at some point in time, but I know that's not going to happen. But we're okay right now.
Yes, just the four of you?
Yeah.
I had an actual question. With some of the, in the report, we have IF. I can probably guess on some of these, but there's no.
Which page are you on?
Page 7 of 8.
This was a problem that someone came to our office and complained about, and I felt very bad about that. At one point, there was a key at the end of the appendices, and at some point I deleted it. So that's my fault. So S is for sustained, UF is unfounded, IE is insufficient evidence, and then WP is within policy. That should be all that
I'm actually going to read.
Well, and we work because we have far more categories. But because of the Oregon public records law, and I've preached about that before, I've seen at times a contradiction in terms that there are very specific requirements for making sure that no one can figure out who the officer is, unless their name's in the newspaper, and particularly when there's been no policy violation. So we do, and again, it's just the four of us, or 3.9 actually, because Beatrice is a 0.9 on the TO, that we do scrub that. So yeah, we do apologize for those not being there. But yeah, the S is the sustain. That's really the one that is probably the one that people are most interested in. Yes.
More readable than the Mueller reports. And that's
While we're on this topic, I wanted to express my admiration and gratitude for this report. I think it's terrific. And I have actually read all of these, and I really appreciate the detail. It's informative, and it's really tells me a lot about what you guys have done and how it turns out. So I just...
And again, Vicki stays pace with it, if you will. It's like something comes in, and this is one of the places that it gets entered. So she stays on pace with it so that we don't get behind in terms of recording and all that. Because again, Leah and Beatrice and Vicki spend an awful lot of time on this report. And I think it is of value to talk about all the complaints.
It's terrific.
If there are no other questions.
I just had a comment. The second time I've seen this year, and several people have commented on the increase in number of complaints, and I'm not worried about that. I don't think it actually means that there's necessarily more bad things happening. I think more people are using the system, And which is actually what Edward was getting at. Ed was saying that was a good thing, and that's how I think of this as well, that we actually have a system that works, and there are a lot of communities that don't even have this system at all. And so when you put something in place to receive a thing, you're going to receive it. And if you have a really good system, you're going to receive more of it. And that's true of police auditor complaints as well. The other thing I think is interesting is how many internal complaints there are. And I think that's a credit to Mark and his office about how the police department trusts the unbiased nature and independence of the police auditor's office to be able to bring their complaints to him as well and to the office. So, and that number's stayed relatively stable over the years, 35 to 40 range as well.
And I think what's important about that too is, because I've been here 10 years, and they're the people that I put, they're the agency I put under my microscope every day, is people like Sergeant Williams and Chief Jepson don't want that kind of thing in their organization that they work for. And so there's a lot of honorable people, even that shift over 10 years of, no, we're not going to look the other way. We're going to put it in the system, and we're going to let the system play out. And I'm not going to risk my job because I didn't report something that I saw bad happen. I'll report it and let the process work, because as you saw with the discipline thing, they certainly are not heavy-handed on the discipline side here at EPD. So, but I think it's also a tribute to the people who work there now and care tremendously. I still remember a few years back where an officer reported another officer using the N-word and deciding that he did not want to work with that person, with that kind of person. And that person's no longer with the agency. I know that it was probably difficult to do that with a peer, but again, what was more important to that officer was the strength of the organization and how the community viewed the organization. And I think that trajectory improves every day. Not to say it was at the bottom when I got here, but what I'm saying is there's still a trajectory. I just heard from a sergeant yesterday, it's like, that's not going to happen while I work here. I'm not going to let that happen while I work here. And again, I think it's a positive trajectory.
You want to move on to Paige?
So, speaking of engagement from the public, part of my job is doing community outreach to let the community know what we do and that we're there for complaints and commendations from the community. I just wanted to very briefly mention some of the things that I have worked on in the past year. We continue to try to stay engaged in social media, since we know it's very easy for people to access information through their phones nowadays. We try to stay very active in community events. Whenever there's an opportunity, we try to table and continue that conversation with community members and making that personal connection with them so that they trust us enough to come to our office when there is an issue. We have, in the past couple of years, we've reached about half of the neighborhood associations, which is a pretty good number, I think, considering sometimes they don't meet on a monthly basis. So we're working on the second round of contacting them to see if we get any interest in the remaining neighborhood associations.
And they want to talk to the chief most of the time. They don't want to talk to us. Well, she had the one, I think it was one of Alan's neighborhood associations that we outreach, and you guys can come, and then they figured out who we were, and it's like, well, you guys are going to get the chief for us, aren't you? And so, unless they're specifically impacted by an interaction with police that they don't feel has gone right, they're far more impacted by crime in their community. And that's the person that they want to talk to. So we get in there every now and then, but yeah, they want to talk to the police chief and the deputy chief because of crime in their neighborhood. I know you're for time. One time I spent most of the meeting talking about rats because I used to work at public health. And so we talked about rat abatement and chicken coops and good things like that, so, but we do
Talk
work
about
really hard.
Bonding with them, Mark, bonding with them.
Yes.
That's okay, we talk about parking.
So we also tried to stay present at local organizations. So Eugene City Club had us for a community spotlight event that they held, and I'm starting to reach out to nonprofits that do direct service so that we can try to attend staff meetings, and hopefully they can pass the message along to the people that they serve so that they're aware of our services. Our biggest event, outreach event that we started a couple years ago is our Public Safety Forum, which I think I have presented about in the past to this group of people. But we held our latest one in May of this year. We had around 100 people attend, which is the same number of people that attended last year, but the school district, the Bethel School District is a third of the size smaller than 4J, so we thought it was a pretty good number considering that it was a significantly smaller school district. We're in talks with 4J to see if they're interested in holding a similar forum in October. So we're going from doing it from once a year to trying to do it twice a year because there is that interest from the community. So we will keep you guys posted if that goes into effect. But those are the main things I know you're short for time, but the things that our office has been doing to try to stay engaged in the community.
And I wanted to mention, and I appreciate because Chief Skinner was at the last one and is going to devote a lot of energy and resources to help us get along with that. It was steered towards the Latinx community because of all the things that are going on, all the issues that impact them, most specifically the ICE issue, but also just things about if I call the fire department, are the police going to come? Or, things that we just know about in government normally, but many people don't. A lot of that has to do with the language barrier. So both of these community forums were completely in Spanish. And as she said, for a city community event like that, for 100 people, that's a lot. And what was really important as well is we had a bunch of organizations like Central Latino Americano and Huerta de la Familia, the Family Garden there, and Women's Space tabling, because they're really the first point of contact for a lot of people. And if they learn more about our organization and the police department and gain more confidence, then when they have that first point of contact, they have that institutional knowledge that they can pass on to that person who has interest in those things. So that has expanded tremendously, and Beatrice just did a tremendous amount of work on those things, and I think that was one of the most important components of what we had, was that tabling by so many nonprofits that provide direct services.
I just wonder, from you or you, which would you choose of these as the top two most effective?
I would say our presence at community events, because that's where we get to make those personal connections.
Yes.
People can come up to us with confidential questions that we can connect on a more personal level with. And again, our public safety forum was a huge.
Has been.
Yeah. I will also say
I
that.
think they're all terrific.
Beatrice got us to have new signage in our office, and since then our walk-in complaints have increased substantially, so.
Yeah, I think that's
So
true.
apparently that was an issue. Good
Yeah.
job. People still are
That's a
asking.
simple thing.
Yeah, so people still ask me like, when did you move into that office? And I was like, we have always been. All Beatrice.
What did the sign say?
It says police auditor's office, but
It's
it's just
very,
up high.
it is, it's very,
Yeah,
now,
it's much
yes.
more
I drive
nice.
down 8 all the time.
Yeah.
Flashing neon.
It used to just be on the door, which.
Instead of an 8.5 by 11 on the wall on the building setback.
Right, exactly, yeah. The teeny tiny
Behind
signage was
your
fine.
Entrance around back.
And we even get asked, well, how come you have complaints before commendations? Since alphabetically, commendations would normally come first.
Yeah.
We were set up for complaints.
Yeah.
And the commendations were
Came
added.
later.
We get the
But,
other way too, people are like, why do you take commendation?
Yeah.
I'd like to get good news.
Yeah, we did get those
Everyone-
questions.
Everyone likes both.
So,
We're kind of pressed for time,
Sorry,
so
yeah,
if
sorry.
we have any other specific questions before we move on? Awesome.
we never mind, stop talking.
And I will say, typically I stay for the whole thing, but I can't tonight, so if you have questions, feel free to contact me.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
You too, yeah.
It's that flashing email.
Exactly.
Moving on to the chief's report.
Well, I'll make up ground on the time, because I think I'll get through some things pretty quickly. As I mentioned earlier, tonight was the deadline for the opposition of the payroll tax, and so that's come and gone. I think it goes without saying that inheriting that is going to just be an enormous job internally for us to prepare for what that means in reality. And just as a couple updates, I know the chief touched on this last time we were here, was we're fully hired, fully staffed. Actually, we're overhired by 2, which I think, I'm new here, but I think that's pretty unprecedented in the state of Oregon. And I come from a policing agency in the metro area, and it's pretty remarkable. Hats off to Tim Shuck and his division for doing such a phenomenal job on hiring. With that said, fully staffed is fictitious in a sort, because we have 40-something officers in some various phases of training right now, 2 of which will be graduating from the State Academy tomorrow in Salem. And then when they get back home, so to speak, they'll go into the cars and learn how to be a cop in the cars out in the field with training officers. So we're already kind of up to our eyeballs in infrastructure issues with like training officers in the field, things of that nature. So it's a real delicate balance to make sure that we don't tax that system too much. And now with this news that we're going to now be embarking on a 3-year plan to add upwards of 90 employees, there's a lot of work to be done. And so with our current situation right now, I just wanted to kind of give an update that we just held a hiring process for sergeants and for lieutenants. We promoted 3 sergeants, created a 1-year list. I think we have 4 on that list, and then we have a list for lieutenants, because there's going to be a lot of that movement, and getting that leadership infrastructure in place is very, very critical. So we have a list for lieutenants. We don't have any immediate vacancies for those, so they're kind of sitting idle, so to speak, waiting for their nod. And then next week, I believe, we are going on a national search to fill a captain's vacancy that we have. And that's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to hiring, because now we're going to be embarking on trying to get through level 1, 2, and 3 of this 3-year plan. Do you have a question? No.
Which space, which captain space?
Well, that's kind of yet to be determined. We just did, I don't know if the chief shared this, but we just did a reorg internally. Once I got on deck, we kind of sat down and we're trying to make sense of the divisions and kind of do a different system, so to speak. Right now, hypothetically, it'd be the investigations division captain, but they're kind of plug and play positions, and we try to put folks where we think they're going to be the most successful, so to speak. And sometimes we put them in places to grow them and develop them. Right now, everyone's going to be growing and developing, quite honestly. We have a very new captain in Eric Klinko. The other captain that we have is a lateral that's been here for a little over 4 years. She just inherited a brand new division in terms of, we just stood up an operational support division. And so we kind of retooled some of the things internally to make sense of the leadership and the accountability piece of it. So those are all the things that we've been working on over the last several months and been gearing up for. So we're going to go into high gear now, because we have this next phase of it. The other thing that kind of goes part and parcel to that is the building. So when you add that volume of employees, the mindful aspect of that needs to be work allocation space and things of that nature. So those are things that you're going to see. You're going to see some changes to the police department. Like there's new paint on these walls, and if you walk through the secured facility, you'll see there's been some things going on, and that's just in preparation of this growth. We are busting at the seams right now in our locker rooms, things of that nature. So just a lot of moving parts to this, and it kind of takes everyone pitching in to participate. A lot of change we're throwing at our department, and like someone earlier mentioned, which I want to be super mindful of, is that the average tenure of our police department, specifically of our patrol division, is fairly young. And like I think Mark was talking about, just the gravity of that in terms of learning to be a cop and the mistakes that get made as it goes along the route of learning with any industry. And so, you know, just looking at our resource allocation and making sure that we're doing this the right way, that we're building up our training division to be able to absorb this kind of lift. So things of that nature. I think that we are doing Safety Town for the kids next week, starting next week. So crime prevention's been working really hard. That's a really cool event. If you've never been to it, it's a really fun thing to do. And I think that's it, unless anyone has any questions.
I haven't read that, I can't see it.
Yeah.
But I wondered if there will be a larger number of detectives in
So so as most of you know that were here last time I was here, I've been here for pushing 4 months. A lot of this was in the works long before I arrived. We're trying to get our head around conceptually what this is gonna look like internally. So you can't put 40 patrol officers out and not have the proper amount of detectives, because the work on the front end equals work on the back end. So the captains right now we're doing some strategic planning around that and trying to land our plane on what those ratios look like, as well as supervision, because we don't, like hypothetically, we added 10 CSO positions, and currently we have, you know, they kind of dual report to patrol sergeants. So we're looking at, that's 15 CSOs out in the field. We're looking at maybe creating 2 CSO supervisor positions to be able to balance that out. And those are all the things that are being taken into consideration right now. Anybody else? Did I make up ground?
Yes.
2 whole minutes.
Your surplus.
Funny.
We're
Just a funny little comment about the staffing and the training and the resources that it takes to do that. There was a night recently where a whole bunch of brand new recruits had been assigned to different shifts to show up and start doing some plainclothes kind of ride-alongs until their academy started. And there was a night that they showed up and there were more recruits than officers working, and recruits got placed with supervisors because there just weren't. So that's kind of a yeah, it kind of lets you wrap your head around what it is that we're doing even right now before launching into this.
Yeah.
Gives them a leg up on
Mega
prepping for their
boost.
sergeant's exams.
Right, no kidding. Yeah.
So the training piece of that is going to be super important. Also, just in terms of messaging of our expectations of the folks that work here, and what the leadership with the chief and I and the rest of the senior leadership team expect of our folks, and the professional level of service that they need to be delivering. So getting that in their ear right as they walk in the door is super important, and having the appropriate modeling of that throughout the organization. So.
I saw Silver's hand.
Yep. So, that said, the chief has given us his word that he meets with every new applicant or recruit, and he feels them out and goes through a process with them. Can we have that same expectation? Because that's huge for me to know that he personally vouches for every new person that comes in.
So every person that we hire, regardless if they're a police officer or not, I believe, and maybe it is just Tim will be able to answer this, they have a final interview with the chief, and I'll be included in that as well. So I'll at least get a seat at that table in the future to be able to sit down and listen to these new folks standing there saying they want to come serve this community, and we will have a big say in that reality. So is that kind of what you're?
It is. It's a word that I've been able to share with other people, and I know that it's important to me.
Yeah.
And And I know that it would also be important to certain aspects of the community that.
Well, I think it's super important, you know, as the chief and me as the deputy chief, to have a value statement attached to kind of our processes. And I know the chief and I both feel very strongly about that in terms of creating a system of the hiring that speaks to what it is we want to see out of the people that come to work here and the attached values that they hold. So.
Thank you.
My understanding is Chief bunked one candidate out, so it's not a rubber stamp process.
Oh, yeah.
No, and it's a gauntlet to become a police officer in terms of hiring, and I had to do it again to come here, and I don't recommend it to anyone. It is, they are in your business, and so, yeah, they don't leave many stones, if any, unturned anymore. It's a way more robust system. There's a lot of layers to it. And like I said earlier, Tim and his division have done I'm very impressed. I'm a new lens to this place. I grew up in a different policing area, so it's really well done. Really well done.
Thank you so much for your
Thank
comments.
You'll be in my office later.
If I could have Keith come up.
Way to go, Kyle. Make it boss
Either one, whichever you're more comfortable with.
They're all the hot seat. Just don't go
Thank
late.
you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, Keith and Kyle get on your butt.
Good to see you.
Good to see you as well. I guess I'm here to talk about the parking program.
Yeah.
So,
should we have some on there?
No, this is, we were going more of an informal conversation style.
Perfect. So, yeah. Tell us about the parking program.
So I get a email from the police department daily. These are complaint-generated complaints, and it has on there location, most of the time year, make, and model vehicles. And so I print those out. I go out to the location. We make 4 attempts to try to locate said people. Then after 4 times, it goes back to the police department. I hand them a notice. The notice says you have 24 hours to move. And if you're caught anywhere in the city in the next 30 days, you'll be considered what is willful, which means that the police can come out and cite and tow.
So for a little bit of background, especially for our new members, can you explain a little bit more about what this policy specifically deals with?
Illegal camping.
In vehicles.
Vehicles, yes.
And then, I'm not sure
So
without Bill here.
What's that?
I'm not sure without Bill.
Without Bill, I think where Bill was trying to go with this particular item is we wanted to hear this part of the process. We had Lieutenant Carolyn Mason come in April and talk to the commission about what the police's part of the response is and the limited tools that we have to respond to this particular, to illegal camping vehicles. And I think it was Bill's hope that, that Keith be invited to the table to talk to us about the process from St. Vincent de Paul's perspective, and if there are any process-related issues or any ways that, because the police commission is hoping to be able to make recommendations towards policy, which is based on the contract that the city currently has with St. Vincent de Paul. So they're interested in hearing this process, and then, of course, hearing recommendations from you about improvement and anything that's currently being done to improve, and so on and so forth. Does that help provide a little background context?
Can anybody hear me?
Sure. I have 3 questions for you, Keith. One is, so you try to go find them and tried 4 attempts. How come sometimes you can't find them? Because they're moving around? I thought the point was that they're clunked down. That's
Well, a lot of times they could be in the motorhome looking at you.
Oh,
Just
yeah.
not answering the door.
All right. Or they're off.
Or they're
going to the bathroom or doing something
away
different.
from their
Senator,
vehicles.
thanks. Yolanda. You guys, you can tell the session's out. You guys know anything better to do.
Feels a lot better too.
Yeah, I bet.
So, those are some obstacles.
Is it just you that's doing this?
The majority of the time, but when I'm away, I have
backup.
Yeah. Several other people that fill in for me.
So the next question is, so when you have these interactions with people, what's that like? What do you tell them? And what do they say in response? Probably each one's different, but
Well, obviously, we want to approach with respect so that it doesn't turn into a confrontation. I go up and say, hey, I'm Keith, I'm working with St. Vincent in the city. There's been a complaint lodged against you for illegal camping, sleeping in your vehicle. I have a notice for you. And then I also try to educate them on coming over to the service station, getting signed up for our services, which include shower, laundry, food, and that mail and stuff like that. And also to get on our waiting list, because we have a legal camping program as well, where we have 72 or 73 spots in Eugene alone. And they're required to, once they sign up, call in twice a week on Mondays and Thursdays. And then when a spot becomes available, they have that spot for 90 days.
And what's their typical reaction to all this?
The majority of the people I know, because I'm chasing them around the city, but generally speaking, is much more favorable than you would think.
Yeah. Well, they probably have sympathy because you're wearing a buffalo hat on you.
I saw Silver's hand as well.
You had one final question?
Yeah. So then when the police come, and are you there too? And
So we
so
have a
that
committee.
that interaction is giving them a citation, which you've heard from Lieutenant Mason. It's just we give you another citation and then give you another one and another one. That doesn't do a whole lot good. So one of the questions that we were tackling with was, well, what good does that do? If we're just giving them citations or we're just moving people around, this isn't really
At some point,
getting at a
they're
solution.
breaking the law.
Yeah.
And so then the police, after my interaction with them, if they move on, they're fine. If not, then they're subject to being cited and towed.
Cited and towed.
Silver?
Yeah, Keith?
Yes.
So how many of these camping, it's usually RV or some sort of a vehicle, or?
It's anything with wheels on it, pretty much.
How many of them have families in them?
Very rarely.
Really?
The majority of the people I come in contact with are single males. Very rarely do I run into anybody with children.
And how big of an issue is, I was living in an RV at one point in my life, and sometimes a vehicle breaks down. So how often does that come up with you all?
Maybe 25% of the time.
It is an issue.
Yeah.
They can't physically move it because it's broken.
So was there any accommodations to them if that happens and they're up for 90 days?
Oh, like if they're in a...
Yeah, if
Oh, in a
their
legal
90 days
spot?
are up in a legal spot.
Oh, we work with them. If somebody's in a situation where they're trying to better themselves, I'm going to school, I'm waiting on my Social Security, I got some medical issues, we'll extend it.
And how many of these legal sites are down in, say, my area?
What area?
South Amazon Park neighborhood, South Eugene.
I don't have very many out there, if I have one.
Just the church down there on Hilliard, is that?
Oh, Church of the Resurrection? Yeah. Yeah, that's probably about it.
Is Amazon Park one of them? Because I know that there's been...
Amazon Park was, we were using that for First Place Family Center. I had some people there in the past, but right now we're not using
It sounds like you have 72 legal spots right now. Can you offer any guess at all as to how many illegal vehicles there are running around? That's like asking, how many spots would we need to, take care of this problem?
There's never gonna be enough spots.
Because that doesn't happen.
We always need spots.
I can believe that. But can you guess? Any guess would be information for me. I don't know.
How many I would need?
How many illegal campers are there around it?
Roaming
now,
the streets.
Yeah. And I don't know whether
50.
I was gonna say
100.
25 to 50,
Yeah.
with 10 to 15 that are
Repeat.
that are getting complaints. There's probably more that are, but yeah, with 10 to 20 that are getting regular, frequent complaints at any given time.
There's a lot of people out here doing it the right way, if you will.
Sure.
And, you find somewhere nice and quiet at night, and you get out in the morning. And you just
Yeah.
move around and never have any contact with me or have any contact with the police.
So B's hand?
Yeah, so the vehicle camping was systemic as far as I know anyway in San Francisco before I left. And I just got word recently from people living there still that has grown. And a lot of it has been, this is just, speculating, that it's been attributed to the people being displaced from housing due to, rent going up. The real estate market has changed a lot. Has your organization quantified some of these people that you've interacted with and seeing how many have been displaced from housing and that's why they're camping in their vehicles, or perhaps they're visiting for the country fair or whatever, students that can't afford housing, for example. Has your organization done any of that type of stats?
My
No,
boss
we
is back
haven't.
there.
There is no case management connected with it, and so we don't know the person, and we may not even have contact when Keith goes out, so that's very hard to, quantify.
Sean. That's my boss, Roxanne O'Brien.
Thank you.
And I saw Kyle's hand.
Yeah, I was just gonna make a comment. So for some of you know, because we've talked about it over the years of me being here, before I came to this position, for 2 years on working days, I was the one managing it from the police side, the on-street camping. And part of that, because of the workload on my officers, I generally took on that duty personally to go out and make the contacts and make the citations, and impounded a lot of motorhomes. And it's a tough position to be in. What I will say is that even though it's a very difficult thing, when the message would get around that we were back out and enforcing, because this is something that goes in waves on the amount of enforcement that we can do, when that word of enforcement went around, we quit getting complaints because the people learned how to do it the right way, which is being on the move. It's not setting up in a certain spot. It's not having the sewage leaking in one spot and causing an odor behind a business. And so that enforcement wasn't just about what you're doing to that one person or making a difference or really cleaning up the streets for that one person, but it was that message that, hey, EPD's back doing the enforcement piece. And so people would be more cognizant of moving around, which is the biggest complaint from neighbors and businesses, is having the same motorhome camped out for days at a time and garbage piling up and the traffic coming back and forth. And so I think that's something to keep in mind when we think about the fact that it really is a pretty rough place to be impounding, towing somebody's home away, and it wasn't any fun. But the bigger picture of it was that it really was effective in the big picture, and that word definitely gets around, and it has that impact on the greater community of homeless folks that are camping and moving around in their RVs.
There's a lot of hot spots.
Oh boy.
Washington Park.
Washington Park, Walmart.
West Eugene.
Ed Cone and.
Oh boy. Yeah, but there'd be 10, 15, 18 motorhomes lined up around the streets. I just park on one end and take a stack of papers and walk one end to the other, lay in paper, go back 24 hours later, lay more paper, and they'd slowly pack up and move on to somewhere else.
Behind Walmart.
Oh yeah, yeah, Commerce.
Yeah.
And then I saw Alan's hand.
Yeah, 2 questions. So the impoundment process, how does that work? And so these people are obviously indigent. They wouldn't be in their mobile home if they weren't. How do they get it out of Hawk, and how does that work?
So there's normally with an impound, there's a fee to the city to release a car from impound. So if you get a DUI and your car gets impounded, you'd have to come here, show registration, insurance, pay a fee to get it out. That fee's waived for the motorhomes, for RVs, if it's for a private camping purpose. There is a fee that they would have to pay to the tow company that's in charge of doing it. I know the tow companies are usually pretty flexible because they don't like having these things. In fact, I battled just finding a tow company that would honor the tow contract and even show up, because there were several companies that notoriously their big rig tow truck was unavailable every single time.
That's not a problem right now.
It's not perfect, that's good. But I think there is usually, I would imagine from what I've heard anecdotally, that the tow companies are flexible because they don't want to have to dispose of
How
these
much
things.
are you talking about?
I couldn't tell you. I know there was one company that I was having come out, and he would, for free, tow it somewhere else. If they could get it released by the police department, they would tow it to your desired location and drop it for you for no charge. So I think there's a broad range. It just depends on the management and what they're dealing with, what they're doing. So
The second question I had, we used to have 80 or so camping spots. That's how many I think so we have that are authorized, and the number keeps fluctuating, but it's recently gone down. And it's really not a matter of us limiting that number. It's the matter that we don't have people willing to have these things set up. So the car camping program has been around for a decade, and we struggle all the time just to keep them going. Do you have any insights on how we can expand that pool, or how it might get bigger? I mean, if we doubled it to 160, it might help people out, but I don't know if we could even do that. It seems to have plateaued, and I don't know if there's a way to bust through that.
It goes up and down. We get 10 spots and lose 30.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. It's in flux, depending on.
So I have myself on the queue next. My first question was that you said you had 4 attempts before what happens?
Before it goes back to EPD. So when Sergeant Williams was over the program, he created a Google Doc. So we were communicating, and still are communicating with that document. We are in negotiations, if you will, with Public Works to use the MMS system, so that we can get sort of like a real time when I go out and put it in the system, and then the police can also see it and respond accordingly.
What's MMS stand for?
I have no idea.
Something messaging system.
It's kind of like CAD for public works.
I know Public Works is using it now. We're going to try to horn in on that.
yeah, that'd be cool. That'd be helpful.
And then you said you get a daily email. I was wondering how many different places were in there and how many emails should I get to?
It varies from day to day. And when we get those, some of them are duplicate. And so it doesn't necessarily mean that it's that many calls. It's just some of them are duplicate. Like yesterday I had 7 pages, today I had 8. Sometimes I get 2, 1. I mean, it varies from their complaint generator.
And then do you get to all of them every time?
Yes.
Perfect. And I had the on the list.
Well, first I want to thank you and you, boss, for what you guys do. And it's really, I think, is a very difficult position that you're placed in. I'm sure you've had to turn people away because you have a limited, a number of spots, right? So then,
they go on the waiting list.
Yeah.
Oh, they go on a waiting list.
Yes.
Okay. Do you prioritize certain,
Really long waiting
people with certain reason why they're camping in their vehicle and they needed a spot to park in.
Everybody's in an emergency situation.
Yeah, it's really hard. Yeah, so I say this because, in San Francisco, what happens is, you have a particular neighborhood that would, complain. They would complain enough to their board of supervisor or to the police department enough that actions would be taken, and what happens is people get pushed out of the neighborhood and they then play shuffleboard, right? They go to another part of the city and park there until there's enough that are concentrated that, then the residents and the businesses would then complain, and again, they get pushed out of that neighborhood. And they're basically just moving around in the city. I really wish that there's some way that, Eugene can respond to that and St. Vincent as well to assist in everybody. But, bottom line is, this is my take on it, the more spots you create, the possibility of people knowing that Eugene has all these, available spots, then it would draw people from other cities to come over and utilize the services, So it's hard because, we're all humans. We all have our hearts. We all feel for another person who is in need, but then it comes out of, your organization's money, city's money, which comes out of taxpayers, pocket. So how do we, address that as a city, as all different organizations that are involved, including yours? There has to be a better solution, and I think that's why I asked the question about quantifying as a start. You have to quantify and figure out who's utilizing your services, and that way you can address that a little, based on math, and based on data that you can collect, right?
But when they come in to receive services, we point them in different directions. If you're a veteran, we have veterans programs, or if you want to try to get signed up for Social Security, we can point you in that direction. Something to help better them while they're in this situation.
I had Edward on the list next.
Having worked with large groups of homeless for different cities, would you say that here, the folks who are or vehicular residents kind of fall into the freshly traumatized, out of their home, lost their job, had an overwhelming medical expense, and might be living with the whole family? Well, you say there are a few of these here, but they're likely to be in the private vehicle. They're in a sedan, they're in a station wagon. And they don't know anything about the rules. They don't know how to stay out of trouble and so on. Then there would be the folks who, they've got an RV, they can't afford to keep it running, and they can't afford to park it any place legal. So they're a little better about skipping along ahead of you, but it's about poverty for the most part. And then you've got, and this is mostly the single males, they love the gypsy lifestyle. They don't want to have a house, they want to have this thing on wheels. And they're the ones that are the most clever about not being there during the day where the complaints are. They'll show up someplace quiet at night. Is there another group here than that, or is that about what we see here?
The chronic ones?
Just, there may be mental health issues.
Mental health issues, drugs.
Alcohol.
All the above.
Just
those are the ones I chase around.
Yeah, just listen to some of the complaints that I hear from some.
75%, if you had to guess.
Sorry, what?
With that group? Maybe 50.
Oh, you think that low? I was
It's
gonna say
changed.
what the percentage is of just the chronically alcoholic, mental health, chronically homeless that are making their way around in their motorhomes.
It's a new batch out. They're just people that's down on their luck and just trying to make it.
Yeah.
And they fall into, if I'm in my RV and I go over to over by Walmart and I see all the rest of these RVs out there, I'll slide in here too.
Did you say 15 or 50?
50.
50. So I have Jennifer and then Sylvia.
Yeah, so first off, I just want to thank you and Roxanne for this program. It's obviously not fixing the whole problem, but as we've been learning with our TAC report, it's an important piece of the overall puzzle that we're trying to create to be able to help these people and give them, like you just mentioned, those off-ramps of, you know, this is the group that's going to help you and this is the group that's going to help someone else. And we're just at the very forefront creating that system. I want to remind us all that we're getting there, that we are making progress, and to not get discouraged. And what Keith's doing is very important. I was on my ride-along not too long ago, and one of the things we did that day was Officer Hubbard had to have someone towed who had a motorhome that was non-functional. It couldn't move itself, so it was towed. And the man and woman who were living in it were obviously very distraught. And I just want to, I know it must be hard for the officers to do that. We had neighbors who stopped by and thanked us, but it still, you know, it still felt bad. You're taking away someone's home. And they had to quickly get out what they needed and throw it in their vehicle, their other car. And I just want to thank the officers who are dealing with this. It's an important issue. It makes a real difference to neighbors who are dealing with some of the side problems that come along with that illegal camping. It just has to be difficult. I'm sure Keith's job isn't easy either, so thank you.
Plus no Kevlar.
He's got the sympathy thing going.
So,
For the hat.
in a real-world
Be a
situation,
Buffalo fan.
we would be able to have a shelter that would be able to address some of these issues. But it comes up, and I want to know if you can tell us, you know, food access, access to, medical needs and showers. What kind of ways are these people who are living on the streets able to access food, able to access medical, or able to access showers?
Our day center on 99.
Yep. Center.
The mission is us. You can come to our place and take a shower, do your laundry, eat, get your mail. We do letters for the library, do letters for the DMV to get your ID. We're also, right now, we have a tent program going on. I think there's 192 people down at our tent program. And this was an add-on from the winter strategy. So I'm believing it's going year-round now.
Yeah, 24/7.
So, so if you come to our day center, we got a whole bunch of different other things that you can get involved with. And our food room, we have a food room that's open 3 days a week, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. Occupy Medical comes to our building on Wednesdays between 3 and 6. So for people with medical needs. So we're kind of like the one-stop shopping on
You have bus passes for people to get out there? It's pretty far to get up to Highway 99. Or Roosevelt.
Yeah. I don't think we give out bus passes for the program.
Is that something that maybe the city council or the police department or
LTD.
another functioning body could give out to people to maybe get out access to those?
I think LTD was doing the bus passes for the Egan Warming Center. I don't know if it's just for regular daily use, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. And as somebody who used the food bank a year and a half ago and was using it regularly, there was only 12 times a month that you can use it, and they upped it to 18 times and not twice in a month. Is that still
No, I think you can use it.
So I can speak to that a little more. It's 18 times in a year. And they just changed the guidelines just last month to where now you can get 18 at one pantry. There are no boundaries anymore, so you don't have to worry about going to this food room or that food room. You can get 18 at this pantry, you can get 18 at that pantry. So there's a lot of access for food right now.
Good. Roxanne, if you want to see it at the table.
Well, I was hoping not.
I thought that might be the case.
I'd like to add something on the bus passes. So I'm a member of the homeless operations team at the city managers level, or anyway, city division managers. And we just recently discovered that we were able to obtain day passes for LTD, that we're looking at how we're going to implement that, at least at the police department and the other divisions, to be able to give people, especially in situations where we're impounding their vehicles or moving them, if we can't get them with Cahoots to get to the day center or somewhere else, we'll be able to give them a bus pass.
That's great.
Assuming they're not prohibited from riding the bus.
That's great.
So we have those in hand, we're just trying to figure out how to implement them.
Awesome.
And for our new members, that's Lieutenant Carolyn
Yes.
Mason, who presented to us a little while ago.
And we do pass out day passes down at the Eugene Locker Program, downtown Eugene, where the people without an address can store their belongings while they're accessing the library or shopping. And so we do give out passes there to get to the access center.
Can you tell us where that is?
It's right in between the Kiva and the library.
Alan's hand, and then
Yeah, for the new folks, Matt, the car camping program has been around for quite a long time. It's been very limited. We just upped, as the city council, upped the amount of money for it. It stays pretty small because it's very difficult to do. When you do that, and correct me if I'm wrong, you have to, it can be no more than 3 in one place. You have to provide sanitary service. You have to have a box toilet or something like that, and garbage, and then it has to be policed and cleaned up. So I think that's why people flux through the system. They get tired of doing that, or they can't afford it anymore. You know, a lot of churches were doing it, and they would have a box toilet, and it's $80, $90 a month, and sometimes that's tough to do. It's not, so the car camping has rules about it, which makes it a little bit tougher to get people to do it, but it also is a necessary thing in order to control it a little bit.
And it was raised up to 6.
6 in one, yeah, that's right. That's right, we just did that
We try
recently.
not to go over 4.
Yeah, because we couldn't find enough spots, so we upped the number. That was the one way around it. So I don't know if you know, we've been doing this for so long and we haven't seen an influx of people coming here to get the services. It just seems to be the same people that get chronically around, and there's a few people changing positions in the circle, but it doesn't seem to do that. And this program actually has been replicated around the state. In fact, Springfield just last year decided they were going to do car camping 20 years after we did it, but yeah. And other cities have done exactly the same thing because it actually works.
And then Kyle?
I had 2 questions. I'm curious what the timeline is for the wait list for getting a camping spot, and then also, do you ever have to turn anybody away from day services? Do you ever max out on any of the day services? So there's no excuse for somebody to say, well, they were full, I couldn't get in, or whatever. There's anybody.
No excuse.
Perfect. And then the other thing, just how long is that camping wait list these
The
days?
wait list is long now. Again, we lost a lot of spots, so I say now probably 4 months maybe.
To get a 3-month spot?
And most of our spots are private.
Yeah.
And so it's not a 3-month deadline.
We're not rotating them.
We don't rotate them out after 3 months. If it's a private spot, if it's a city spot, we do, but we only have 1 or 2 city spots left.
Oh.
Alton Baker's gone. And
So at least if in the 4 months, if they can get one of those spots, one of the church spots, and then keep their act together and keep their spot cleaned up and be good stewards of their location, then they could be there for a year or longer.
Well, most of the churches have the Conestoga huts.
Right.
And so when they get into a church, that tends to be like a year or so. Depends on, they find a good fit and the church is willing to continue to help them.
And so are those RV people then, are those RVs getting disposed of or moved along somehow? Because it kind of seems like those would be 2 different population groups.
Well, most of the Conestoga people don't have vehicles, very rarely. But I'm finding that the churches that we have remaining have the Conestoga huts.
So how many actual RV spots are there available for people that have an
Churches?
RV? Well, for whatever, I'm living on the street in my motorhome and.
72.
Yeah.
So that is the 72. So
Yeah.
there are more.
How many are in churches?
The churches, probably maybe 7.
Oh.
7 to 10.
So they're mostly businesses.
Yeah.
And
Businesses are
it's
private.
72 addresses, but it's, all of those addresses have, 3 to 4
Right.
vehicles in them.
Each.
So, yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
So we're really
oh.
looking at 280, 250 to 300 actual parking
Right,
spots.
and
Oh, so
those are
places.
input, we do a
That's a little different.
extensive data entry interview on the people we enroll in the regular car camping. So we have, good stats on that.
So it'd be like 72 times 4.
Yeah.
Not all the churches have more than one space, though. I know that there's a few that
Yeah,
have just
right.
one.
Just one.
Yeah.
So V's hand next.
Yeah, just to piggyback on Kyle's question, so while they're waiting, while they're on the wait list, what happens to them? I mean, do their vehicles get towed? Do they,
Depends on what their actions are.
Okay.
Again, the majority of the folks are doing it the right way. And then there's that percentage that are not, and then those are the ones that we can stay in contact with, and those are the ones that eventually get told.
Yeah, so I got an email not too long ago. Roxanne, this might be a better question for you. The email gave me the impression that St. Vincent decided to shut down the spots at the Allenbaker Park and the Science Center area. Is that not accurate?
Well, no, that isn't accurate. Well, let's put it this way, they weren't good sites because there were so many complaints, because you have, and so, the city approached us and we, we talked and we kind of came to a mutual agreement. It's not that we wanted to shut them down, but, was it Parks and Rec, Keith, that,
Yes.
that we met with? Parks and Rec, really wanted it to be gone out of those places.
And were they, would you say, legitimate complaints, or I just don't like seeing this?
No, I think they were pretty legitimate,
Okay.
yeah.
That's good to hear.
Couple
All right.
murders,
Oh.
I dealt with
Which
a lot of
happened-
complaints at those 2 specific locations those couple of years that I was managing it, and I would agree also that that just wasn't a good fit for,
Okay.
for what this program
The email
was. And the
surprised-
populations that are utilizing that space, and the kinds of behaviors that sometimes go along with having this population
Right,
in
right.
those very visible locations that,
I spoke with
I'm
the
glad to hear
new
that they-
director at the Science Center, but he was relatively new and he told me he thought it was fine. And then I got this email a little later, so maybe they were not so fine.
well, with the
Right.
science factory, because of the children there, and there's a
Oh,
lot
yeah.
of, we had legal people there, but then the illegal people would camp out there as well.
It attracted other people. Okay. Well, that's good to know. It's
I'd
sad
show
to
up at
lose
that-
spots, though.
Yeah, I'd show up at that parking lot and there'd be the 3 or 4 legal ones and 8 others strewn about the parking lot all over, and we'd go through and do a 3-hour roundup.
I would go out and then address it, and they would say, well, we could be here in the daytime during park hours, and I didn't spend the night here.
Oh, you play all kinds of games, the cat and mouse games of,
Okay. Well, that's good.
and then send night shift people to go roust them at night. But then we don't want to be rousting them at night. But at the same time, if they're claiming and lying and getting away with being there, I mean, it's just it's a complicated game.
You have to go there when they're there.
And to dispel the lie that they're giving that they're not camping out, and work through that process.
Have any other questions, or is there anything else we can do to help you?
We need more spots.
Yeah, that's the name of the game, right?
Yeah.
Need more spots.
I think that if we had more spots, then we could help more people, and then that would kind of take the ease off of chasing them around.
Why do you think people say yes to having car camping spots?
The majority of the ones, probably unofficial security of their businesses. I had a guy approach me years ago, and we still have this spot on Airport Road. Somebody was going and cutting through his fence, and he had vintage cars there. And they were going in getting the radiators and stuff for the metal, and taking them away and, selling the metal. So we put one person out there and it worked out pretty good. So we wound up with 3, and then his stuff obviously
stopped.
Yeah, went away. And so those kind of testimonials, I can approach somebody else and say, hey, there's a guy that used the program and it's a win-win. They get free
Yeah.
security, our clients get a safe place to park, and everybody's happy.
How do they find out? How does that work? How do people get to where they say, yeah, that sounds like a good idea? I mean, there's no advertising campaign about it. It'd be a weird
Sometimes it's
advertising
word of
campaign.
mouth. I heard from my neighbor John that you guys have a parking program where I can have somebody at my place at night. I get a lot of those calls.
Oh, okay.
So then we for the businesses, I would drug test them and make sure they're not on drugs before I put them out there. And then we do a meet and greet and then go from there. We work with a lot of construction companies too.
You have any good ideas about how to expand the number of spots?
Maybe have an informational type meeting like this and invite businesses in.
I wonder if we could partner with the Chamber of Commerce somehow to
Yeah.
push some word out through the chamber.
Or there's business associations scattered around the city.
Or the city clubs.
Rotary clubs.
A lot of people have stigmatisms for homeless people.
Yeah,
You know,
run into all the
drug
time.
addicts, alcoholics.
Criminals.
Yeah, criminals, and I don't want them on my property.
Right.
But once you get past that fear and, actually give somebody a chance, 99.9% of the time it works out.
Yeah.
And we get calls from them from time to time at night where they are calling it, hey,
There's some guy.
I'm security at this place, which means they're really in the car camping program. I'm the security guy, and there's somebody breaking in here, and we've gotten good calls for service from
And they're so
folks from
happy
the
that they're
program.
there, they're gonna keep everybody else away.
Yeah, right. 'Cause if it doesn't
They
work.
don't want to lose their spot.
Right.
I have myself down in the queue next. Do you think there's merit for expanding that to other forms of illegal camping? The same security model?
What do you mean? Other forms?
Well,
Tents.
tents, yeah.
That's a whole nother animal.
Yeah. They tend to be more permanent.
I personally would not go respond to somebody living in a tent. Just being a civilian. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Walking up in somebody's camp and, no.
Just for the safety of the people who are providing that security service, they kind of want a metal shell around them. You don't want the bad guy sneaking up on them in their tent and taking them out so they can steal all that metal. And some people would.
We tell them if, hey, get out of here, don't work, call 911.
Yeah. It does strike me that there's an opportunity here. I'm just not sure who's going to spend the relatively small amount of money that would be needed to publicize to businesses that there is this option. But
The chamber has been working to get the word out to their contacts.
somehow I'm not hearing this as being that much the Chamber of Commerce kind of business on the whole.
Yes.
So somewhere between word of mouth and the chamber, there's a gap.
Yeah.
And we could be providing more service as a city and as a community.
Yeah.
But nobody stepped in to advertise that this exists to the right people who have the properties. You guys are advertising to the people who would fill the need to be placed there. Just saying.
Yeah, there's also a neighborhood area business associations that aren't affiliated with the chamber necessarily. More like a neighborhood.
Also professional associations like, the Oregon Association of Scrap Metal Recyclers, as a for instance.
Yeah, anybody else have any questions or?
I just had one point. As Terry mentioned, the City Club, we are doing a program on homelessness and the unhoused on July the 26th. So.
Thank you so much for coming.
Last one for the summer.
Yeah.
Thanks, Keith. Talk to you.
Thanks, Keith.
Thank you, Keith. Thanks for the work you do.
Thank you. And I wear this Bills hat because I'm from Buffalo.
We kind of knew that already.
Yeah, I guess.
Because no one else would.
Yeah.
People just like feeling friggin' indispensable.
Right. Next up on the agenda is the community outreach update. I know that Scott was previously sort of heading this up. So since he is no longer here, we have a fork in the road ahead of us. I would like to gather folks' ideas on the best way to reach out to the community as sort of a starting point. I know many of us have ties with various neighborhood organizations or community groups. So what ways do we think we should reach out to the community? Should we take this continued round robin style where we get where we can? Or should we pick a few groups and endeavor to?
I have a sort of basic question about it. Sort of like, what are we doing here? I'm a little unclear about what we're doing with it. I mean, it's really easy to understand the auditor's need to make contact with you and to let people know they have an open office and it's safe to come there. You know. So I don't have any problem with that. But we just we deal kind of with policy, and that's a real different kind of concern. And
I think
I'm not sure who needs, or I just don't know even how to ask the question. It just seems real different.
I think the conversation stems from the fact that in the ordinance it says one of our duties is to bring community concerns and represent the community. And how do we represent the community if we're not talking with them every day? So that's why I think.
Okay, so some things seem to me to make more sense than others. I'm not sure going to these organizations is the kind of obvious thing to do, given what we need. Something like they mentioned of a table group at a table where you talk with individuals one-on-one. Seems to me like that might have more leverage, but I don't know. So,
Jennifer.
Yeah, I have a slightly different take than Sean does. I think you all are here because you are the community. For us, you are the community. So I don't know that it's so much that we need a whole bunch of feedback from the community as it is more important that they just know that this exists. If there's someone sitting in this room doing this work that is representing them and from the community, I think that's more important than getting feedback on specific policy that they're not going to have the time to look into. Although it's good, I think people that come here are often very thoughtful. But for me, it's more that this exists and what it does, and that it's here, serving you and doing what's important for you. So along this, I think we need to delete all these commitments because this is so old now. We need to refresh. So I would delete all the commitments and delete all the yes and no's and just put which ones we've done already and just kind of like, let's start over.
For clarity though, you like the model of, going to some of these when we can?
I think it's worth continuing to try. As long as people have time and, I'm still working on some folks, but I think refreshing the commitment because some people might have better luck than others. Some people are more comfortable with certain people than others, so.
Silver next.
Yeah, I'm a person that goes to a number of these anyway, so I'm going to be there, and I'm not going to be the same person who's going to want to do it and make that commitment to continue to do these. It's a matter of we want the community to know that we're here, that we exist, and the work that we do. And I've said it before that I think we should have an opportunity to make a public call. We're going to have this special event, and the police commission is going to be there, and we want you to have an opportunity to come out and see what we do. That's what these are for. But that's I think too many people are intimidated to come out to a police commission meeting,
especially at the police station.
Yeah, exactly. So
plus poor transit connections.
Yeah, I think we should be able to do something more outreach in that sense as well. I kind of second what Councilperson Yee saying about just kind of we've done this, we've looked at this model, we filled as much as we could with this, and now let's do some other thing because this is not working.
have Edward next, and Alan.
Really good question, Will. What do we want out of this? Because really, I think, if I remember when we first started having this conversation, and certainly what I'm doing right now with these public service announcements is, this is the police commission and this is what it does. Within that is, and here's how it serves you, but it's, as you say, kind of abstract for a lot of people. If we want to show people what we do, one thing we could be doing is using something like social media to poll them on the policy stuff we're working on. Yeah, I know, it's a double-edged sword. But people do like it when you listen to them, and we're not bound by any of their responses. I'm just saying that simply saying in one fashion or another, here's who we are and this is what we do, doesn't actually engage people that much. So if we want something that is beyond simply essentially handing out the brochure in one form or another, there has to be more to it than this is who we are and this is what we do. So the question is, do we want to go any farther than this is who we are and this is what we do? If it's just about, not name recognition, mission recognition, so the taxpayers can see what they're getting for the fabulous amount of money they spend on this commission, then essentially giving people the brochure in one fashion or another is adequate for that. If we actually want to use the tools we have for something like asking people their opinions, then that's another direction to go and not that much more expensive. So, but it's a lot more work.
I have Kyle and then myself. Oh, sorry, I totally skipped you. I have Alan and then Kyle.
Kyle's going to make a stay till 8 when the floor is dry.
Wouldn't want anybody to get hurt.
Thanks for watching out for us. So two points. One was when we did our retreat, Yi and Matt weren't there. Dee and Matt weren't there. One of the things I thought we were going to do was rotate where we go. So it was that issue of, you know, we're always here at the police station, not the most hospitable place for some people to go to. So rotating around, at least I think it was 4 times a year, having it someplace else could help, and then we could advertise it when we're in that part of the city to different groups. So I think that's really still a good idea, and that will help quite a bit. The other thing is kind of on what Will was talking about was, you know, what is the purpose of this group? And, you know, we have a whole myriad of boards and commissions that we have, and all of them have different kind of roles. Some of them are like the Human Rights Commission, for instance, does take a lot of public input and use that to then formulate stuff back to the council, and same with the Sustainability Commission and other things. But this isn't that type of organization that it doesn't have that role of like taking in public input and then floating it up to the council. It's really about an internal mechanism to have for the police department to use to have some civilian eyes on and thought about the policies and procedures that are going on within it, and you know, how can they do better on dealing with homeless camping and things like that. So I don't know that that public outreach part of the mission is part of the mission of the police commission in particular, as it is for other types of boards and commissions that we have. So I'm not that worried about it. I think it's important that people know that this exists, but I'm not sure we have to do a massive public outreach to get input from people, because
then what do we do with that?
This is the problem we should have. But
Kyle?
If I could respond to what the councilman is saying, that I think the reason for us to be out there is so that we can get more involvement. That's the only reason that I would want to have people know what the police commission does. Because everybody thinks that I work for the police department. And, you know, some public awareness would let them know.
Well, you're not
that's
going to get robbed,
right? I'm like, I still got a ticket, not having a seatbelt on. So, I tried.
Did you know I'm on the police?
Yeah.
That works.
But I mean, that's the reason why I would want to have more public awareness.
Yeah.
Kyle?
And I really would just piggyback off of what's already been said, in that you are the public for us, and not to lose sight of that while you do sit on the police commission, in our eyes, we put things in front of you because you are the public. And so it's almost, might be even more effective if you always have your police commission hat in your back pocket, and 3 times a week, you pull that out in a conversation where it comes up naturally, to be able to get people's input on what it is that's coming up on an agenda, so that you can be doing more info gathering and then bringing those opinions. So it's not just you talking about your own experience, but hey, 2 weeks ago I talked to somebody about this and they had this thought. And so really always having the tentacles out and that police commission cap in your back pocket to be like, well, hey, actually, and be able to relay that. And I think it's easy
Can we
to
get shirts instead?
Right.
Where are these hats you speak of?
Commissioner at work. And so I think it can be easy to just forget about that and be like, oh, well, there's a meeting coming up, but always really trying to keep that in the back of your mind and look for those daily opportunities to be able to have those kinds of discussions that can help be informative to us when the meetings come around.
Yeah, we are your public sounding board.
I was next. So I'd like to cite the actual ordinance under our powers and duties. It's the first one under A. So A, in general, the police commission exists to work towards the following outcomes for the community. Number 1, to increase communications between the police and the community, leading to a greater understanding of the preferred policing alternatives in the city. So my editorial on this would be, we're not 100% representative of our community, so that's why I think this is going to be a valuable endeavor. And the question isn't, I don't think whether we should, but the best method to. In that the rotating meetings is the first thing I've gotten, and the objective is to know that we exist and know what we do. V, did you have?
Yeah, just trying to understand for clarity and all that. I'm kind of new in Eugene still, but knowing that San Francisco had 10 precincts versus here, we don't have that, you know. So the number of officers there were, you know, a lot greater than here. So each station, we're able to send an officer to go out to community, such as neighborhood watches or neighborhood association, and give updates about what's going on with the, you know, department, things like that, answer questions, gather information, and bring it back to the station. I don't think that happens here, right? Am I right, Deputy Chief?
Not right now,
Okay.
because of our resource allocation, and
Right.
that
Most of them are on
absolutely
overtime.
would be something I think should be happening. It happens probably a little bit more organically in a lot of ways, but I know exactly what you're speaking to, and the agency I used to work with had that same mechanism. And right now, quite honestly, we're not staffed to be able to do that with the
We have
situation we're in.
had,
We will be.
we have had a crime prevention officer come out to neighborhood groups.
Yeah, we have
yeah.
different
Yeah,
mechanisms in which that occurs all
Yeah.
throughout the
So the
organization.
reason I ask that is because I see the purpose in you know, doing outreach, because of the, you know, the absence of that mechanism right now, for the police department to send officers out to, you know, to have that kind of connection with the different groups, you know. So people don't really contact the police department or call up 911 unless something really happens to them. But sometimes you have questions about, you know, I'm seeing people not stopping at stop signs, you know, what is being done, things like that. It's not an immediate urgency to call up the police department and ask that kind of question. So that would be, in a way, a feedback that we can gather from the community and bring it back, you know, to this body.
Those are, I mean, what you're speaking to, if I may, just for a sec, is, you know, proactive policing efforts. And the condition we're currently in, until we get to a point where we're more fully realized, is more of a reactive stance of policing. That's just being honest. When we're not able to service the volume of calls that we're being dealt. And that's the place we need to be. That's the place we're striving to be. And what you're speaking of is district-specific policing, where the officers have some ownership in their own service districts, and they're able to not just be out shagging calls, but being out rubbing elbows with the community and setting up these kind of meetings that you're talking about with neighborhood apartments and things of that nature. And downrange, I'd like to see us be there. And again, I'm new here. He's probably a better voice to some of this stuff in terms of where we've been, so to speak. And that's always, I think, where we try to be.
We've had times where we were doing more community meetings and different supervisors would be assigned to be trying to get to more of them. But that has definitely waned the last probably 5 or 6 years. But that again is just that call volume has just continued to kind of reach a critical mass where there just isn't the time, unless you're going to pay overtime and pull somebody out of a more likely an admin position to go do it. But even that, people get tired of the overtime, and it's just not worth.
Yeah, we try to augment, I think, with, crime prevention units and things of that nature, but the brass tacks of it is the public wants to see the cops. I mean, not to diminish the capacity or the importance of those other positions in the organization, because they're very vital. They want to speak to the cop. That's what they want to speak to.
Then I had Edward and then myself.
One of the toughest things I've had to adjust to coming from a larger city back to a smaller city is the scale at which things happen. I had a deputy chief in San Francisco tell me he really loved coming to the first meeting I set up for him. Next one needs to be at least 100 people. That's because that was what was a good use of that person's time. And we're not going to get 100 people at a community meeting here unless something goes terribly wrong. And then you'll get 100 people at a community meeting here.
They did. Police auditor did.
The other problem with going out to things like neighborhood associations, of course, is they are homeowner heavy. There are tremendous obstacles to some people getting to meetings like that, childcare, transportation, so on and so forth. So if you're gathering information there, you're getting a skewed view. And if you're putting out information there, it's not necessarily getting to the rest of the demographic in that geographical area. That's tough. So if we're looking at a meeting-based approach to this, we're always going to be reaching fewer people than we want to and hearing from fewer people than we need to. Not to say it shouldn't be done, but that's just a fact of that. If we're looking at, I don't want to keep touting social media, except it works very well and it's very cheap. That's another way to reach people and even specifically target people who are not able to show up at those community meetings and either tell them something or ask them something. But again, we come back to what are we trying to accomplish when we have these interactions? If we're trying to get a broad picture of what people are concerned about so that we can have that in the backs of our minds here at this table as we think about policy, that's wonderful. If we're going to specific incidents, well, we're not even allowed to do that. And that's a lot of what gets thrown at me as a commissioner. So why did this happen? What about that investigation? It's like, I can tell you generally what I understand about how the department works. Here's some phone numbers you can call in the department to get better answers, but I can't get involved in that particular incident, which is, as you say, disappointing. They want somebody with a gun and a badge who can go do something about it. So again, it comes back to what are we trying to accomplish? And I think if we don't have that really clear, then all of this discussion about how we go about it is sort of going to go round and round. Does that make sense?
So my comment, I'm super glad Beatrice stayed. I was wondering if you thought there was value in partnering what we try to do with what you're already doing. In some ways, we might do that effectively. And feel free to take a seat at the table if you want.
I can just briefly from here say that I did talk to Mark about, because we connected Sean and I over, just briefly over email about moving forward if there's a way to collaborate. And Mark feels that there is a possibility. I mean, even we're not exciting to people sometimes. Like I said, they always want to be there. So whenever we can get our foot in the door someplace, I can always mention the police commission. And if somebody on the board is available to go as well, you can always, share about what you do while we're presenting as well. So that's mostly the efforts that I mentioned earlier, like going to staff meetings of organizations or hitting all the neighborhood associations, and I'm constantly thinking of different ways to do outreach. So anything that I think of, I can always share with you guys, and whenever whenever there's a possibility for both of our office, or commission and our office to go, then we're willing to collaborate with that.
Thank you. Good.
I don't know if there's anyone else on the list.
No, you are
Being
next
new
up.
to this, because the agency I came from didn't have a group like you, if I may, thank you for what you do. But my observation and what you guys are discussing, it dawned on me that obviously you are put here to be part of a process to help speak to, how we can do what we do better. But could you educate me just for a minute a little bit on when you're in the midst of a policy session? I assume that's what you do. You have a policy session. There's a lot of exchange that goes on between, I'm sure, Kyle and others to educate you on kind of the parameters in which we kind of have to operate under. And so from my observation, what I think is super important about this group and about each of you individually is that you are really kind of the advocate or spokesperson for our police department back to the community to talk about what that process looks like, to explain the kind of education that goes in lockstep with being able to speak very clearly from a legal platform as to how we land on and navigate certain policies. And so I'm sure that's already going on, but when you talk about this collaboration, I think that I'm trying to flip the script a little bit selfishly, that I think you guys are an advocate for this process, and while it's important to get that input, I think the output is equally important.
Can I speak to that?
I saw Silver's hand first, so
Just real quick, so the body worn cameras.
Yes.
I was a part of that process, and an incident happened, and rumors spread on Facebook. There's not going to be any footage. They're going to manipulate the footage. They're going to do that. And I spoke to it immediately. No. The policy is body worn cameras, always on. And that helped.
Right.
So, yes. And you vocalized it in a really nice way, and I'm glad you were able to do that. But, that's a big part of the process that I appreciate about being on this body. So.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, because to me, that's the value add, that to telling the public kind of or reframing some of the narrative that sometimes occurs in a vacuum.
Yeah.
And that's super important.
Edward?
It's the demystifying role that you're talking about, and it's super important for us, and each of us brings a different angle to that. Some of us have experiences with public safety, some of us have experience having public safety done to us. We all come from a different direction, we've had different life experiences, so our explanations to any member of the public are a little different, as is appropriate. It fascinates me sometimes what people think they know about police work or think they know about EPD. And it's very useful that EPD is as professional as it is, and it's possible to point at something, say on the website, and say, yep, that's actually the way that appears to work. But tell me if it doesn't, and I'll tell you where to go. And just opening that door sometimes to people is really useful. And that's when they don't want to see a gun and a badge. Because if they got mistrust for the uniform, hearing it from somebody from their community, from their peer group, it's more believable even if it isn't any more understandable. Does that make sense?
It's always a two-way conversation.
All right. So to summarize the conversation so far, we have two separate, and please, if you didn't get the same impression from the conversation that I did, please speak up. But we have two separate questions in front of us. The first is the purpose. What do we want to accomplish? And that will shape what tactics we use to accomplish it. So the purposes I've heard so far are to advocate for the process that Eugene has put in place for accountability and community input, which includes the police commission, the auditor's office, and the civilian review board. Just that it exists, that the system exists. And the second purpose is to represent the community of which we are a part, so that on the policy discussion side, we can do that with accuracy to what the community actually believes. Is everybody pretty much feeling the same way about that? All right, and then the tactics side, we have social media coming in. We have rotating meetings coming in, which I'll discuss with Jeremy and get some ideas on. And we have working with the auditor's office, and we have going to various community groups in a somewhat ad hoc but continuing basis. Pretty much on the same side, same place. All right, that has been very helpful for me. I will, I think, probably schedule a time to make some decisions, give everybody some time to think about it, and unless there's any objections, move on to closing comments.
Ask just one question for bookkeeping clarity.
Yeah.
It was mentioned in here to clear out this, where we had commitments. Is that something that I should be having prepared for the next meeting, or
I think we
keeping
can,
that as part of the discussion for next time?
unless anybody has objections, we can put it under a 2018 or like a past and a future designation. So we keep the data. We don't throw any of the data away, but we have a new section for ongoing things. All good? Sweet. Then let's start closing comments with Kyle.
I was just going to point out, as you guys take a look at that auditor's report, that big long list of all the complaints and the kind of the detailed description of it, just pointing out that so many of them are all supervisor, sergeant talked to, and pointing out that for all those complaints, how many of them, which is the vast majority of them, received a personalized callback from a supervisor, and the amount of time and effort that goes in on the police department side to resolve those, and the vast majority of those that are resolved with a conversation. And it was just kind of impactful for me to look through and just read over and over and over and over, and the amount of time that is put in on the police department side as well in order to work through all of those, to try to make amends and understand what the problem was, make sure that there was or wasn't an issue, and to talk to the officers to make sure that we're trying to be on our best. That's all I've got. Thanks for being here.
No comment. Trying to get out before 8.
Why are you looking at me?
No pressure.
I just wanted to say thanks for the thoughtfulness that went into this. Most of the people here might not be here still, but I found it very informative. It's helpful for me as someone new sitting on the board to hear this information and apply that into future discussions about policy. So thank you.
So, Joel is at LCC. He was one of the finalists for the board position. If he does get a position with the LCC board, then he won't be here on the first Thursdays. I was the other applicant, and I was told that I was not put forward, so that's fine. That I bring that up because we have a few spots that I think are needy to be filled. If it's not Joel from the HRC being here, who will be, and who's going to be here from the CRP. I know they have a process for bringing that forward, so I'm looking forward to seeing some new people on here. Do you have an answer, Jeremy?
So the CRB position, we will, should be appointed by September, and we should see that person at that time.
Okay.
Does that sound correct?
Yeah, right now you're in, because of what they do, they have to have a background check before they actually see cases. So they're in that process right now, and hopefully we'll have them all done for our August meeting. And so August or September, they'll appoint somebody.
Thank you. And as far as the HRC, Joel has yet to mention that to me.
Okay.
Yet, so once he does, then we'll
we'll talk and get that figured out.
He might not have been chosen, so it wouldn't be an issue.
Yeah, he is. He's also, we just reappointed him to the HRC, so he's,
He still might not be the other
if he's
person.
not
So
the
let's move on to
LCC
V.
guy, then he'll stay.
Oh, sorry.
I suspect.
Okay. I still want a sort of a data pool of, we have these many calls coming in, and even though we're past the place where they're not gonna put it to the ballot, there's still that thing out there where people are saying, we're not getting police response. So how many of those calls are somebody who's responding or calling about a car being stolen or misplaced, or a homeless issue, or actual legit calls that need to be responded to? And I had asked for that information in the last meeting, and I don't know how that can be disseminated to us, but I'd like to know some of the numbers on that. And that's it.
So how many calls for service are not receiving a response of any kind?
Well, for what reason? How many numbers, and what are some of the reasons that they're not being responded to? Because I know it's not going to be, something that's...
Meaning on our end as to why we're not responding, or how the call's being coded, categorized?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's it.
V?
Great meeting. Thank you for the warm welcome. My squirrels are running all over in my head. So much information. But the time went by really fast. When I thought about 2.5 hours with no break, I was, to be honest, I was really surprised. But it went by real fast, and now it's already 8 o'clock. So the agenda was really well organized. So thank you. You did a fabulous job being chair.
First meeting.
First meeting, yes. Very well. Congratulations.
Good job, Sean.
We were playing tic-tac-toe, so...
And coming from, having been on the advisory board for the SFPD, I also wanted to, thank you guys for what you do. I know each time you put on your uniform, you leave your family, you leave your loved ones behind to go to work, and you don't know what the outcome is at the end of the day. So, what you do is tremendous for the society. We can have all the stop signs you want, but if there are nobody out there to enforce that, it's really meaningless. So really, I thank you for what you guys do, and all you officers do.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I just wanted to throw out quickly that I've been on the commission for about 3.5 years, and I've never felt better about our department with the new chief and deputy chief and the way we're headed, and the transparency and the professionalism. I can't say enough. And I was actually talking over the blueberry bushes this morning, picking blueberries, and this lady said something about the thing that happened at Starbucks. So I said, well, there's a police commission meeting tonight. So that was actually happening, and it does happen, I'm sure. It will to you, and it does to most of us. So we do get a chance to say things. And so anyway, but I've never felt better about things, so that's all I need to say.
I'm going to keep it short. Just welcome to the new commissioners. Nice to meet the DC. Moving right along.
So, Jeremy, do we tell the CRB or the HRC what types of diversity we might be lacking on our commission when they're making their decisions?
That is a great question, and I do not believe that has been the practice.
Because there's a lack of female representation on this commission. I don't know if y'all noticed, but Terry and I are we're trying our best. But I mean, if that could be, I'm sure there's other types, and I don't know if there's a way to find out if they even care what we think.
So that was mentioned to the mayor when it came to looking for recommendation.
Yes, I've mentioned it to her many times.
Yes, that was definitely, that was mentioned to her, given the candidate pool.
Right.
That wasn't an option.
Right.
So if you're asking me to, I would be happy to convey that on your behalf
to the other commissions.
To the CRB and the HRC.
And I don't know if anybody else has other opinions about that. I'm sure there's other areas of diversity we're lacking.
I would probably be the only one who could eat a habanero at the table, but...
Talk about it.
So kind of reverse profiling.
Yeah, a little bit.
So I think it would be fair to say that both of these other commissions should know the current makeup of the board.
Maybe
Making
that would be good.
recommendations might be a little bit outside of what I feel
That's a good
comfortable
idea,
with.
Sean, actually, just maybe to just send them
What the current makeup
what
is?
the current makeup is.
So when the commissioners filled out their individual applications to begin with, they kind of filled out
Right,
your
demographics.
diversity. Yes. So that's something that I could move.
Created the space for it to happen.
What's that?
Now share that with everybody?
Okay, so if you'd like, I could see that that's being
Because I know they
taken.
use like housing status and income and
consider
racial
it.
profiling and age and gender.
It's all part of that application.
That, I think,
So
I would hope that that would be helpful to them.
would you like, would the police commission like?
Yeah, unless anybody objects, I think that's a fair thing to give them.
All right, fine. Then I will do that.
Will?
Eager welcome to the new commissioners. I forgot to say anything earlier because I got distracted, but I'm delighted to have you on board. And I just want to say again how delighted I was with this report of the auditor's office, but I could see in it how much work was done by police individuals, and I was really impressed with that.
I do a lot of those.
Do you? Okay, I was impressed with you.
So I get all of the policy complaints where there isn't a particular person named in it. So if it's not necessarily a specific person behavior, but it's more of an issue about what happened, then I get those and I get those callbacks, and I do a fair amount of those.
So Sergeant called, that's you, often.
There's probably a few dozen in there that were Sergeant was me, at least.
Stacy, if you have any other comments?
No, thank you.
My only comment is.
I'm walking myself with you.
My only comment is thank you for being such a great group of people to work with. I was really nervous coming in, and I'm 300% less nervous leaving today. And congratulations on the new kiddo.
Hey, thank you. Yeah.
And with that, we're
Here
adjourned.
soon.
Cool. Welcome back.
We need to see our.
So.
Your legs are there.
Let me kill the
Yeah, that's
Yes. I hope so.